Patty woke before the alarm, the room still gray with the last stretch of night. For a moment she lay still, counting her breath, steadying the flutter in her chest that felt like a small bird trapped by a closed window. Today, Justin took over the company. Today, the signs on the doors, the tone of the hallways, even the coffee in the break room would feel different. She made tea, ironed her blouse again, even though it was already crisp, and checked that the photo of Alea in her wallet was tucked safely where it always lived. Routine was a kind of armor. She dressed, tied her hair neatly, and whispered to the quiet apartment, "You've done harder days." The train hummed beneath the city, and the station slid by in clean, practiced order. Through the window, she watched rows of offices blink awake. Her mind drifted back to Mr. IRENE Whitaker, Justin's father, who never started a meeting without asking whether she'd had breakfast, who learned the names of her siblings from a single remark in the elevator. He had believed that patience made a company run like a good heart. He had told her once, after a long night sending proposals, "You're family here, Patty. Not on paper, but where it matters." The memory steadied her as she climbed the steps to the lobby. The reception desk wore a bouquet heavy with lilies, and the guard gave her a sympathetic smile that told her he read the morning news. In the open-plan floor, the lights were brighter than usual, as if the building wanted to prove it could be new. People spoke in low voices, eyes flicking up and away. Patty set her bag down, smoothed her skirt, and booted her computer. The login chime sounded strangely loud. She checked the calendar, confirmed the 9 a.m. leadership presentation, and the vendor call at 10:30. She lined up pens, straightened the stack of onboarding forms for the new intern, and breathed through the rest of the flutter. At 8:43, the elevator doors parted, and Justin strode out like a headline in motion. He was taller than she remembered from the holiday parties, a sharp suit that looked like it had never met a wrinkle, a phone in his palm that didn't stop glowing. 3 people trailed him, 2 assistants she had never seen, and a consultant already lifting a tablet to record everything. He didn't slow down. He seemed to slice the air, and the air agreed to move aside. He arrived at the glass conference room, looked through its wall as if it were not there, and then he saw her. His eyes did not brighten with recognition. They cooled. He turned into the aisle, shoes clicking, and stopped at her desk. "And you are?" It would have been easy to shrink. She sat a little straighter. "Patty Lane, executive assistant to Mr. Whitaker." "Past tense," he said, a quick smile that wasn't a smile. "We're streamlining. I prefer direct reports, dashboards, not gatekeepers. Where is my new operations lead?" For a second, the room tilted. She caught it with her hands and set it upright. "Your father scheduled the vendor call." "My father," he said, crisp enough to cut paper, "is retired. We're doing things different now. I don't need traditional roles." He pitched his voice so it carried across the floor. "Everyone, quick note before the 9 o'clock. This is a new era. We'll be phasing out outdated functions, automation over redundancy, innovation over memory. If you slow us down, you will step aside." A tinny laugh broke somewhere and died at once. The consultant typed furiously. Patty smelled lilies again, too sweet, as if the bouquet had been left in the sun. She stood. "If you need a handover, I can prepare." "Handover?" He let out a sound that did not reach his eyes. "Look, this isn't personal. The company needs to move faster. We don't keep positions because people are comfortable. I looked at your file. 10 years. Good for you. But we're not a museum." The words were simple. They still struck like thrown coins. She glanced at the team around her. Mariah in finance twisting a ring, Nate pretending to study a spreadsheet, the new intern standing very still. No one met her gaze for more than a heartbeat. She had trained most of them. She had remembered their birthdays and their black coffee no sugar afternoons. She swallowed. "So you are letting me go?" "I'm saying we don't need secretaries," Justin replied. "HR will finalize the paperwork. You can collect your things now. We'll send any personal mail to your address on file." Silence arrived, thick and clumsy. Somewhere a printer coughed out 3 pages. Patty nodded, because nodding was something her body knew how to do. "Understood." She opened her drawer. There wasn't much inside. She kept her life light at the office. A paperweight shaped like a small glass C from a vendor who said she kept projects calm. A pen with a scratch where Alea had dropped it as a child on a surprise visit afternoon. The framed photo of her daughter in a graduation cap, the corners worn soft from thumb passes during long nights. She wrapped the frame in her scarf so it wouldn't crack. Justin, already turning away, added, "We'll forward your last paycheck. HR will give you details on severance. Efficiency is kindness, Miss Lane. This will be quick." Kindness, she thought, and the word floated like a leaf just before it sinks. She set the paperweight on the pile of forms she had prepared for someone else's new beginning. She gathered her bag. People cleared space by doing nothing at all. The elevator took an unhurried time to come. Reflected in its doors, she looked composed, older than yesterday, but steady. When it arrived, she stepped in. The doors slid, and there was her floor for a last breath. Rows of screens, lilies in the corner, a son who believed speed could replace history. On the lobby level, the scent changed to polished stone and cool air. Patty walked out into the morning. Cars hissed along the street. She tightened the scarf around the frame, not because she feared it would break, but because hands need to hold something after they let go of a decade. Above her, the glass building threw back the sky bright and indifferent. She did not cry. She did not plead. She moved forward, each step a steady beat. Behind her, upstairs, an age was ending with a speech about automation. Ahead of her, she did not yet know the shape of the next day, only that dignity travels light and far. Patty's desk, once the neat corner that anchored the whole floor, looked strangely exposed under the bright office lights. The news had spread even before she stood up to gather her things. She could feel the whispers sliding across the room like drafts from an open window. Nobody dared come closer, not with Justin still prowling through the hallways, issuing orders in that clipped voice. She bent down, hands steady though her chest was unsteady, and placed each item into a plain brown box that HR had set on the corner of her desk. A pen, her notebook filled with years of meeting minutes, the small mug Alea had painted when she was 12, chipped at the rim but precious. She moved slowly, not because she hoped someone would stop her, but because she needed time to breathe between the silent blows. A few colleagues gave her brief glances. Mariah with her red eyes that darted away quickly, Nate fiddling with papers he wasn't reading. They wanted to say something, she could tell. They wanted to reach out, maybe even hug her, but fear of Justin's disapproval sealed their mouths shut. It wasn't cruelty, not really. It was survival. And she, who had once reminded them to be brave during difficult presentations, understood the silence. Still, the hurt lodged itself deep. 10 years of loyalty had ended without even a proper thank you. The final act of leaving the office felt like peeling away her own skin. She carried the box past the reception desk, past the lilies that still smelled too strong, and through the glass doors into the city air. The world outside did not notice the ending of her career. Cars streamed by, people hurried to meetings, the air smelled of coffee and exhaust. Patty inhaled sharply, tightened her grip on the box, and began the walk home. She had taken the train in that morning, but now she chose to walk. Each step was heavy, but she needed to feel the pavement under her shoes, something solid after being dismissed as if she were disposable. By the time she reached her apartment, her shoulders ached from holding the box too tightly. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The quiet of the small living room wrapped around her. She set the box down gently on the couch and sank beside it. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at the photograph of Alea's graduation resting against the cardboard edge. Then the composure cracked. The tears came quietly, sliding down her face as if they had been waiting all day. She pressed her hands against her mouth, not wanting to hear herself cry, not wanting the walls to echo her weakness. That was how Alea found her when she came home from work. A mother curled on the couch, pretending to read a magazine but with eyes still red. Patty straightened quickly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her cheeks. "Long day, sweetheart. I made some tea." Her voice was calm, practiced, the same tone she used when she wanted to protect her daughter from worry. But Alea wasn't fooled. She noticed the box, the framed photo inside, the mug she had painted years ago. She looked at her mother's face and saw the effort it took to hold herself together. "Mom," she asked softly, "what happened?" Patty hesitated. To say the truth felt like admitting defeat. "Justin has new ideas," she murmured. "He doesn't think my position is necessary anymore. It's just business." Alea's hands tightened into fists. She knew what that meant. Fired, cast aside. No gratitude for years of loyalty. "Just business?" she repeated, anger lacing her voice. "That man humiliated you in front of everyone, didn't he?" Patty reached across the small table, covering her daughter's hand with her own. "Don't be upset, Alea. Life changes. I'll find something else. What matters is we're together, and we'll manage." She tried to sound reassuring, but her eyes betrayed the wound. Alea nodded slowly, but inside her chest burned. That night, as her mother went to bed early with the excuse of being tired, Alea stayed awake at the kitchen table. The lamp glowed over her notebook as she scribbled thoughts, ideas, anything to keep the anger from consuming her. She remembered the way Justin had always carried himself at company events, entitled, dismissive, certain the world owed him respect. She thought of the times her mother had worked late nights, giving up weekends, guiding younger employees as if they were her own children. To be thrown away so coldly was not only unfair, it was inhuman. As midnight settled, Alea made herself a promise. Her mother's dignity would not remain broken. Patty had given the company her loyalty, her wisdom, her heart. If Justin thought he could erase that with a single order, he was wrong. Alea would find a way to restore her mother's pride, to show him that arrogance had consequences. She closed the notebook, her jaw set with quiet determination. Tomorrow would be the first step. For now, she whispered toward the darkened bedroom where Patty slept, "I'll make it right, Mom, I promise." The city outside continued its restless rhythm, but in that small apartment, something had shifted. A daughter's vow had been made, and it carried the weight of a future Justin could not yet imagine. The following week, the apartment transformed into something more than just a home. The kitchen table was no longer just for meals. It became the command center of a brand new venture. Alea sat there for hours with her laptop open, designing pages, writing simple but confident lines that told the story of their service. She named the startup modestly Lane Consulting, using their own family name as a sign of pride. The logo was simple, just two overlapping circles, one for wisdom, one for innovation, drawn in calm blues and grays. "We don't need to look flashy," she explained to her mother. "We need to look reliable." Patty, meanwhile, took out her old address book and scrolled through her phone. For years, she had been the person people trusted to solve problems quietly, the one who knew how to connect the right person at the right time. She dialed old contacts cautiously, her voice steady but humble. At first, some were surprised to hear from her. A few asked carefully about the rumors they had already heard, that she had been dismissed the moment Justin took control. Patty did not complain. She spoke only of her new path, explaining that she was offering consulting for operations and staff management. The dignity in her tone impressed them more than any advertisement could. Days later, the first message of interest arrived. It was from an old vendor, Mr. Carlson, who had often worked with Patty when she was managing contracts for Justin's father. He requested a meeting over coffee. Patty nearly refused, nervous that it was just sympathy disguised as business. But Alea insisted. "This is what we're working for, Mom. Let's go hear him out." At the cafe, Mr. Carlson greeted her warmly, not as someone fallen from grace, but as an equal. "I always said you were the glue that held that place together," he remarked after ordering his drink. "When I heard what Justin did, I shook my head. No sense of value, but maybe it's a blessing because I could use your help now." He explained how his own mid-sized company was struggling to manage new hires, systems were messy, and deadlines often slipped. "I trust you, Patty. You've never let anyone down. If you'll take us on, we'd be honored." Patty blinked back the sting in her eyes. For the first time since her dismissal, someone saw her not as discarded, but as capable. She accepted the project, promising to start immediately. When she and Alea walked out of the cafe, they clasped hands, both smiling so wide it startled passersby. Their first client, their first real chance. Back at their apartment, the work began in earnest. Alea polished the website with a success stories section and proudly typed the new partnership as their first entry. Patty reviewed the vendors' files, creating checklists and schedules late into the night. The energy was different now. Tired, yes, but purposeful. Each page of notes felt like building bricks for a stronger future. Meanwhile, across town, Justin was sitting in his glass office with the city skyline stretched behind him. He looked every inch the modern executive, suit perfect, hair slicked, voice confident, as he delivered another presentation about the company's new era. But beneath the polished exterior, problems were multiplying. Without Patty and other experienced staff, small cracks widened into costly mistakes. Invoices were filed late, meetings were missed, and one important client nearly canceled after being left waiting with no prepared materials. When employees tried to raise concerns, Justin brushed them off. "Don't cling to old habits," he snapped. "We're innovating. Mistakes are part of growth." His management team exchanged uneasy glances but obeyed. Fear of his temper kept them silent. Still, the gossip spread quietly through the industry. Justin's company was stumbling, while Patty Lane had started something new. At a networking event later that month, whispers drifted through the room. "Did you hear? Patty Lane is consulting now. I heard her daughter runs the digital side. Sharp young woman, they say. Honestly, I'd rather hire her than deal with Justin's chaos." Each remark was cautious but full of respect. Word spread quickly, respect traveled faster than scandal. When the rumors finally reached Justin, he laughed out loud. "Patty, starting a company?" He dismissed it with a wave of his hand. "She's a secretary, not a strategist. People always exaggerate. Give it a few weeks, she'll close shop." But beneath his laugh was the faintest shadow of irritation. Something about the persistence of her name bothered him. Still, he convinced himself it was nothing. He had investors to charm, projects to announce, and a reputation to polish. He was too busy looking at the city from his high tower to notice the ground shifting beneath him. Back in the modest apartment, Patty and Alea worked side by side into the evening. Their client was satisfied, their website received new inquiries, and their confidence grew little by little. It was not wealth yet, but it was proof. Proof that dignity could rebuild itself. Proof that starting small could still mean winning. And as Patty closed her notebook for the night, she whispered to herself, almost surprised at her own voice, "Maybe we can really do this." The apartment was quiet, but the silence no longer felt heavy. It felt full of possibility. Patty didn't know that Justin was scoffing at her name in boardrooms across the city. She didn't need to know. All she needed was the steady beat of hope returning, one small win at a time. The first client had been a turning point, but soon more followed. One project led to another, and Patty found herself busier than she had ever imagined. She spent her mornings reviewing operations reports, her afternoons meeting with clients, and her evenings sharing long discussions with Alea about strategies for growth. Together, they became a team that blended experience with modern innovation. Patty had the wisdom of years, the patience to see problems from every angle, and the integrity that made clients trust her instantly. Alea had the energy and fresh vision to translate those insights into digital tools, streamlined systems, and professional presentations that made their work shine. Word of mouth carried quickly. A small retail shop recommended Lane Consulting to another struggling business, and soon their client list began to stretch across different industries. One owner praised Patty for her ability to calm chaos with clarity, while another marveled at how Alea's digital dashboards made everything easier to track. What had started at a kitchen table now felt like a growing force. Patty no longer doubted her worth. She walked into meetings with her head high, her voice steady, her smile genuine. At home, the atmosphere changed as well. Where silence once hung heavy with worry, laughter returned. Patty hummed while cooking, something she hadn't done in years. She joked with Alea over late-night snacks after long work sessions. Even the little apartment seemed brighter, as if the weight of humiliation had been replaced with the energy of hope. One evening, Patty stood before the mirror, brushing her hair, and caught herself smiling at her own reflection. It had been too long since she had seen that face looking back. She whispered quietly, "I'm not broken after all." Meanwhile, across the city, Justin's empire was beginning to wobble. At first, he dismissed the numbers as seasonal fluctuations. A slight dip in revenue, a delayed payment here and there, nothing to worry about, he told himself. But as the weeks passed, the cracks grew wider. Mid-tier clients, once reliable sources of income, began to withdraw. They didn't make a loud announcement. They simply shifted their contracts elsewhere. Some returned to Patty, remembering the calm competence she had always provided. Others were drawn in by Alea's modern approach. Justin's meetings grew sharper, his temper shorter. He slammed financial reports onto the table, demanding explanations from his staff. Why are these accounts down? Where are the new contracts? But his managers had no answers. The systems were messy, deadlines were missed, and important clients complained of poor communication. Justin waved off their excuses with irritation. "We'll bounce back. They'll regret leaving us." Yet inside, a seed of unease began to sprout. At the office, the mood was tense. Employees whispered about how many clients had walked away, about Justin's arrogance, about the way things had been different under his father's leadership. They were careful not to speak too loudly, but the atmosphere of discontent was impossible to ignore. Some even dared to mention Patty's name, recalling how smoothly everything had run when she was still there. Justin heard the whispers, and each time his anger flared. He couldn't stand the thought that Patty, someone he had dismissed so casually, was being mentioned with respect while his own leadership faltered. He laughed in public whenever her name came up, scoffing that she was nothing more than a secretary playing at business. But late at night, staring at the slipping numbers on his reports, his laughter rang hollow. Back in their apartment, Patty and Alea celebrated another small victory, a client referral that opened doors to a larger partnership. They ordered takeout, clinking their glasses of sparkling water in a quiet toast. "To new beginnings," Alea said with a grin. Patty smiled, her eyes shining with gratitude. "To us," she replied. For the first time, she felt the shame of her dismissal fading, replaced by the pride of building something of her own. The momentum was growing, and though Patty didn't know the full extent of Justin's troubles, she sensed that life had a way of balancing itself. The man who had once declared her outdated was now losing ground, while she, with her daughter by her side, was rising from the ashes stronger than ever. The world had turned upside down, and Patty, who once thought she was finished, was only just beginning her new chapter. Justin, however, sat in his glass office with clenched fists, staring at the numbers that refused to improve. For all his confidence, he couldn't escape the truth staring back at him. Something was slipping through his hands, and he had no idea how to stop it. Justin's mornings had once begun with confidence, pressing his suit, rehearsing lines about innovation, rehearsing smiles for investors. But lately, mornings felt heavier. Reports sat stacked on his desk like weights he couldn't lift, and each page told a harsher truth: revenue slipping, contracts ending, clients pulling out quietly. His meetings became battlegrounds. In one tense session, Justin slammed a folder shut and glared at his management team. "How many times do I have to repeat myself? These losses aren't acceptable. You're supposed to be the best, but all I see are excuses." His voice thundered across the glass-walled room. The managers exchanged nervous looks, unwilling to confront him directly. One finally spoke, a senior operations lead. "Sir, the problem isn't just the market. We've lost too many experienced staff. Processes are falling apart. We need people who understand the foundation." Justin cut him off sharply. "Are you blaming me? I got rid of dead weight so we could move faster. If you can't keep up, maybe you should join them." The silence that followed was thick and heavy. Even his loyal assistant lowered her eyes, scribbling notes without comment. But the worst was still to come. Weeks later, an audit revealed irregularities in company funds. A trusted manager, one Justin had personally promoted, had been quietly manipulating accounts, diverting money into side businesses. The discovery sent shockwaves through the staff. Investors demanded answers, employees whispered in corners, and Justin's fury boiled over. He stormed into the manager's office, shouting accusations so loudly the entire floor heard. Security escorted the man out, but the damage was already done. The company's reputation took another blow, and trust eroded further. Meanwhile, across town, Patty and Alea sat in a modest but lively co-working space, their eyes bright as they reviewed a new contract. They had just secured their biggest project yet, a mid-sized manufacturing company that needed a full overhaul of its operations. The CEO, impressed by Patty's calm professionalism and Alea's modern systems, had chosen Lane Consulting over several established firms. It was the validation they had been working toward, proof that their model worked not only for small clients, but for larger ones too. The nights were long, but they were filled with determination, not despair. Patty stayed up revising workflows, while Alea created sleek digital dashboards to track productivity. The client praised them both, remarking how their balance of wisdom and fresh perspective was exactly what the company needed. Patty could feel her confidence returning in full force. Each successful meeting replaced the humiliation of her firing with pride. News of their success traveled quickly, carried by word of mouth and quiet admiration. Industry circles began murmuring about the rise of Lane Consulting. Patty Lane, yes, the one Justin dismissed, is making waves, people said. Her daughter is brilliant too. Together, they're unstoppable. The gossip reached Justin, but he refused to acknowledge it. At a dinner with investors, one mentioned Lane Consulting with cautious respect. Justin forced a laugh, though it sounded brittle. Patty? She's playing small games. We're a corporation. She's just a boutique operation. Nothing to compare. Inside, however, the mention gnawed at him. The irony that the woman he had deemed outdated was now building momentum while his empire crumbled was unbearable. At home, Patty sat quietly one evening after finishing a call with the new client. The apartment glowed softly with lamplight. She thought of Justin, his anger, his arrogance, his fall. A small part of her pitied him. She had seen him as a boy once, standing beside his father at company events, still unformed, still learning. She wondered if arrogance had been his shield all along. But then she remembered the sting of his words, the humiliation in front of her colleagues, the way he dismissed her as outdated. The pity dissolved into resolve. Alea, noticing her mother's faraway look, asked gently, "Are you thinking about him?" Patty sighed. "A little. It's hard not to. But I remind myself, we're here because of what he did. His cruelty pushed us to build this. Maybe that's the only gift he gave." Alea reached over, squeezing her mother's hand. "Then let's make sure we never waste that gift." The cracks in Justin's empire widened with every passing week. The scandal over the funds rattled investors, the financial losses piled higher, and morale sank lower. Yet he continued to wear his suits, deliver his speeches, and scoff at the rumors. Pride wouldn't let him admit the truth. Across the city, in their modest apartment, Patty and Alea smiled at each other with weary but hopeful hearts. They had risen from nothing, and now their names carried weight. Patty knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but she also knew one thing with certainty. Dignity, once lost, could be rebuilt, and sometimes it shone brighter after the fall. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers, polished marble floors, and the low hum of conversations between executives and entrepreneurs. It was one of the city's annual corporate gatherings, a place where partnerships were formed and reputations were reinforced. Patty had never attended as a guest before, only as a secretary standing quietly behind her boss, taking notes. But tonight was different. Tonight, she was here as the co-founder of Lane Consulting, invited by one of their new clients to represent the company. Her dress was simple but elegant, a navy blue that matched her calm demeanor. Beside her, Alea walked with the poise of someone who had been preparing her whole life for this moment, though she was still so young. They entered the room together, mother and daughter, and heads turned. Some recognized Patty immediately, whispering, "That's her, the one Justin dismissed, now running her own firm." On the other side of the room, Justin stood with a glass of wine in hand, surrounded by investors. He had perfected his laugh, loud and confident, but when his eyes landed on Patty across the crowd, the sound caught in his throat. For a moment, he thought he was seeing a ghost. She looked too composed, too radiant, to be the woman he had humiliated months before. He excused himself from his circle and strode toward her, his steps quick and sharp. The chatter around them seemed to fade as he approached. "Well, well," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "I almost didn't recognize you. It's unusual to see a secretary pretending to be an executive." Patty turned slowly, her expression calm. "Good evening, Justin." Her voice was soft, but it carried. She didn't flinch, didn't let the barb wound her. Around them, a few executives raised their brows at Justin's tone, their respect leaning toward her rather than him. Alea, standing beside her mother, met Justin's gaze squarely. Her tone was even, almost polite. "Pretending? Lane Consulting has just completed a major project for Harrington Manufacturing. Perhaps you've heard of them. They were considering your firm, but chose ours instead." Her words were clear, measured, and they struck like quiet thunder. The small group of listeners nodded subtly. They had indeed heard of the project and the efficiency with which it had been completed. Patty's reputation was no longer whispered in pity, but spoken with admiration. Justin's face tightened. He forced a chuckle, waving his hand as if swatting away an insect. "Harrington is small scale, hardly worth my time. My company deals with real players." One of the nearby executives, a gray-haired man with decades of industry respect, stepped forward. "With all due respect, Justin, Harrington is an important manufacturer. The way Patty and her team turned their operations around was impressive. Many of us could learn from that balance of experience and modern thinking." His words landed heavily, and several others murmured in agreement. Justin's ears burned. He felt the attention slipping from him, shifting to the woman he had cast aside. He tried to regain control. "She's a temporary fad. The market needs bold leadership, not recycled experience." Before Patty could respond, Alea spoke again, her eyes steady. "What you call recycled experience is actually wisdom, and what you dismiss as temporary has already outlasted your promises. The market doesn't need arrogance, Justin. It needs results." Her voice was calm, not raised, but it cut through the noise of the room with precision. The crowd grew silent for a beat, watching. Patty placed a gentle hand on her daughter's arm, signaling calm. She turned back to Justin, her voice still composed, graceful. "This is neither the time nor the place for arguments. We are here to celebrate progress, not to compete for pride. I wish you well, Justin." With that, she inclined her head slightly and turned toward another group, her dignity intact. The move stunned him more than any sharp insult could have. She had refused to fight, refused to descend to his level, and in doing so, she had made him look small. The executives followed her with their eyes, gravitating toward her grace, leaving him standing awkwardly alone. For the first time in his life, Justin felt a crack in his certainty. The room no longer admired him blindly. He saw respect shifting, admiration slipping from his grasp. And worst of all, it was because of her, the woman he had humiliated, the woman he had believed was nothing without him. As Patty and Alea mingled with new acquaintances, Justin remained near the edge of the ballroom, his wine untouched. The laughter he had rehearsed no longer came easily. In its place was something unfamiliar, insecurity. It settled in his chest like a weight he couldn't shake. For a man who had always believed himself untouchable, the realization was almost unbearable. That night, as the event wound down, Patty left with her head held high and her daughter smiling proudly at her side. Justin, however, lingered behind, staring at the fading crowd, aware that his grip on power and on the respect of his peers was slipping faster than he dared admit. Justin's empire began to crumble faster than anyone had expected. Numbers on his reports dipped from red to deeper red, and the once polished graphs that had impressed investors now told a story of decline. Contracts that should have renewed slipped away quietly, one by one, without explanation. Investors who had once praised his vision stopped returning his calls. Some even sold their shares at a loss just to distance themselves from the mess. The final blow came when one of his closest allies, a man who had stood beside him during the transition of power, pulled out his capital entirely. The betrayal stunned Justin. For weeks, he had told himself that his team was loyal, that they believed in him. But now he realized loyalty only lasted as long as the profits did. When the foundation cracked, even the strongest ties broke apart. In the silence of his office, Justin stared at the portrait of his father that still hung on the wall. The stern but kind eyes looked down at him, reminding him of all the things he had dismissed: patience, respect, humility. "You built something good," Justin whispered bitterly to the portrait. "And I ruined it." For the first time in his career, he admitted the truth, if only to himself. His arrogance had hollowed out the company from within, and there was no one left to blame. With desperation clawing at him, Justin made a decision he never thought he would make. Late one evening, when the office had emptied and the city lights glowed like scattered stars, he left the glass tower and walked quietly through streets he had once thought beneath him. His destination was not a boardroom or an investor's villa, but a modest apartment where Patty Lane now lived. He hesitated at her door for a long moment, rehearsing words that felt foreign on his tongue. When Patty finally opened the door, surprise flickered in her eyes. She hadn't seen him since the corporate event weeks ago. He looked different now. His suit was the same, but his posture was bent with weariness, his face drawn with lines of stress. "Patty," he began, his voice unsteady, I need your help." Her hands tightened on the edge of the door. The memory of his cruel dismissal rushed back, the humiliation in front of her colleagues, the way he had laughed at her loyalty. For a long moment she said nothing. Finally she asked, her tone cool, "Why would you come here, Justin? You made it clear I was outdated and unnecessary." He swallowed hard, shame flooding him. "I was wrong. I see that now. The company is falling apart, and I don't know how to fix it. You always knew how to hold things together. Please, advise me. Just tell me what I should do." Patty's chest tightened. A part of her wanted to slam the door and let him drown in the mess he had created. He had earned his downfall. But another part of her, softer, older, shaped by years of loyalty, hesitated. She closed her eyes briefly, then shook her head. "I can't, Justin. You humiliated me. You stripped me of my dignity. Some wounds don't heal just because you ask." His eyes flickered with desperation. "I'm not asking for myself. I'm asking for the company, for my father's legacy. Please." His voice cracked on the last word, the arrogance drained away. Still, she stepped back, her resolve hardening. "No, Justin. It's not my responsibility anymore. I built my own path after you destroyed the old one. You'll have to find another way." With that, she gently but firmly closed the door. Inside, her hands trembled. She sat down heavily on the couch, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected him to come, hadn't expected to see him stripped of pride. The sight unsettled her. When Alea came home later that evening, she found her mother still sitting in silence. Patty told her what had happened, voice low. Alea listened carefully, her eyes narrowing with thought. "You turned him away?" she asked. "Yes," Patty said firmly, though doubt lingered in her tone. "After everything he did, how could I not?" Alea reached for her mother's hand, squeezing it. "You were right to protect yourself. But think about this, Mom. Holding on to anger won't build us anything new. We've already proven ourselves. We've risen above him. Maybe, just maybe, you don't need to punish him further. Revenge won't give you peace. It will just keep you tied to him." Patty looked at her daughter, struck by the wisdom in her words. Alea was young, but her clarity reminded Patty of her own late husband, steady and fair. She exhaled slowly. "You think I should help him?" "I think you should decide whether holding on to the past still serves you," Alea replied softly. "We've already won, Mom. Don't let bitterness be the only thing we carry forward." That night, Patty lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Justin's weary face haunted her, but so did the memory of her own humiliation. She was torn between the sharp edge of old wounds and the quiet path of grace. Somewhere in the darkness, she realized that whatever choice she made next would not only define Justin's future, but her own peace of mind as well. Justin had never been good at waiting, but this time he forced himself to. After Patty refused him at her door, he spent nights pacing his apartment, staring at the phone, rehearsing the words he had never said to anyone. "I'm sorry." Pride fought with desperation inside him, but desperation finally won. The company was collapsing, investors had fled, and staff left each week in quiet resignation. He no longer had a fortress to hide behind. All that remained was the truth. He needed to face the woman he had wronged most. He arranged a private meeting in a small cafe far from the glass towers where his name was once spoken with authority. Patty almost didn't go, but Elia urged her gently. Hearing him out doesn't mean forgiving him. It just means you'll have peace knowing you didn't avoid it. With a reluctant heart, Patty agreed. When she entered, Justin was already there, seated at a corner table, his suit wrinkled in a way she had never seen before. He stood as soon as he saw her, his movements hesitant, his once practiced confidence stripped away. "Patty," he said quietly, "thank you for coming." She sat across from him, folding her hands in her lap. "Say what you need to say, Justin." For a moment he faltered, then exhaled deeply. "I owe you an apology. No, more than that. I owe you respect I never gave. I was arrogant. I thought power meant knowing everything. I thought loyalty was weakness. But I see now, without people like you, people who cared, the company was only an empty shell. I ruined what my father built, and I hurt you most of all. I'm sorry." His voice broke at the last word, his eyes glistening with unspilled tears. Patty's chest tightened. For months she had dreamed of hearing those words, yet now that they came, they didn't soothe as much as she expected. The wounds still throbbed. She remembered that morning he had called her outdated, the humiliation of packing her things under the gaze of whispering colleagues. Her pride still ached. "I never asked for much, Justin," she said softly. "Only respect. A simple thank you would have been enough. Instead, you crushed 10 years of loyalty in front of everyone. Do you know what that does to a person?" He lowered his head, unable to meet her gaze. "I know now, and I regret it every day." She studied him carefully. For the first time, she saw no arrogance, no false charm, only a man stripped bare, humbled by his own failures. Her heart wavered. But pity was not the same as forgiveness, and forgiveness was not the same as forgetting. "I can't help you rebuild," she said finally, her voice steady but gentle. "That chapter is closed for me, but I will tell you one thing. Respect people, or you'll always lose them. No strategy, no innovation, no amount of money will ever save you if you treat people as tools to be used. That's the lesson you must carry." The words struck him harder than anger ever could. Justin's shoulders sagged, and for a long moment, silence hung between them. Then he nodded slowly, tears finally spilling down his cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Even if you can't forgive me, thank you for saying what I needed to hear." He stood, bowed his head once more, and walked out of the cafe. Patty watched him leave, her heart conflicted. She had not given him what he wanted, but she had given him the truth. And in his broken posture as he disappeared into the street, she knew he had realized he had already lost everything. His company, his allies, and most of all, the respect he once thought was guaranteed. That evening, Patty returned home, quiet and thoughtful. Alea looked up from her laptop, concern on her face. "How was it?" she asked. Patty sighed and sat beside her. "He apologized. Truly. For the first time, I think he meant it. But I couldn't go back. I couldn't fix what he destroyed. I only gave him advice, respect people, or he'll keep losing." Alea's eyes softened. She reached for her mother's hand. "You did the right thing. You didn't let bitterness guide you, and you didn't let him take more from you either. Dignity isn't about revenge, Mom. It's about standing tall, even when they try to tear you down, and you did that." Patty felt tears prickle at her eyes, but this time they were not from pain. They were from release. She smiled faintly, squeezing her daughter's hand. Then maybe, at last, dignity has been restored. In the quiet of their small apartment, with laughter drifting faintly from the street outside, Patty felt lighter than she had in months. The scars of humiliation remained, but they no longer defined her. She had faced the man who hurt her, looked him in the eye, and walked away whole. For the first time since the day Justin fired her, she felt truly free. The months that followed marked a transformation so profound that Patty sometimes found herself pausing just to take it in. Lane Consulting, once nothing more than an idea scribbled by Alea late at night, was now a name spoken with respect in boardrooms and conferences. They had grown carefully, never rushing, but each project completed opened doors to another. What began at a kitchen table had expanded into a small but bustling office space, shared with a handful of eager young professionals who admired Patty's steadiness and Alea's innovation. Clients praised them openly. The perfect balance, one said during a testimonial, experience that understands people and modern strategies that understand the future. Patty smiled at those words because they summed up exactly what she and her daughter had built together. It wasn't just a business. It was proof that dignity could be restored, brick by brick, choice by choice. At home, the air felt lighter than it had in years. Gone were the heavy sighs, the restless nights, the shadows of humiliation. Patty rediscovered simple joys, tending to plants on the balcony, cooking meals with music playing softly in the background, laughing with Alea until late at night. No longer tied to toxic loyalty or to the suffocating shadow of a boss who never valued her, she breathed freely. Her worth was no longer dependent on someone else's recognition. It stood tall on its own. Alea flourished too. The quiet, determined girl had grown into a confident leader, one who could speak at industry panels without trembling, one who negotiated contracts with a steady gaze that impressed even the most seasoned executives. She often credited her mother for her strength. "Walking this journey with you," she told Patty one evening after a successful project launch, "is the greatest gift. I've seen how resilience looks in real life, and it taught me I can face anything." Patty listened, her heart swelling with pride. She had thought her dismissal was the end of everything, but in truth, it had been the beginning of Alea's rise. Together, they had turned pain into power, humiliation into honor. Across the city, Justin's life looked different now. The glass office tower was no longer his. The empire he once boasted about had collapsed under its own arrogance. To cover debts, he had sold assets one by one until he was left with only a modest apartment and a quieter routine. He no longer had assistants, no investors flocking around him, no glossy events where people applauded his speeches. The silence of his downfall was deafening. Yet, from afar, he still heard the name Lane Consulting. At first, the sound was bitter, a constant reminder of the woman he had cast aside. But over time, bitterness turned into reluctant respect. He had mocked her as outdated, only to watch her outlast him with grace. Standing at the edge of his window one evening, he whispered to himself, "She won, not by destroying me, but by being everything I wasn't." For the first time in his life, humility felt like clarity. The final scene unfolded quietly. Patty stood on the balcony of her apartment, a cup of tea warming her hands. The city stretched before her, alive with lights and sounds, but she felt no urge to be in the center of it all. Behind her, Alea worked late at the dining table, her voice steady as she spoke on a call with a new client. Patty watched her daughter for a moment, smiling softly. She thought of the journey, the humiliation of being called outdated, the sting of being discarded, the sleepless nights of doubt. She thought of Justin, broken now, living modestly, watching the world move on without him. But most of all, she thought of herself. She had not simply survived, she had risen. And in that quiet realization, she understood the truth. Victory was never about revenge, never about proving others wrong. It was about standing tall with self-respect, about choosing dignity over bitterness, peace over pride. Patty lifted her cup slightly, as if in a silent toast to the life she had reclaimed. A breeze stirred, carrying with it the sounds of laughter from the street below. Patty smiled, the lines on her face softening, her heart steady. It was indeed a new dawn, not the kind painted by someone else's power, but the kind she and Alea had created with their own hands, their own courage, and their unshakable bond.